Hello and thank you for attending our webinar on overcoming self-sabotage. My name is Birch. I'm the sales manager for Reliv Asia Pacific. Well, do you sabotage yourself? A lot of people certainly do. And they take a great big swig of self-sabotage, and I'm not talking, by the way, literally. By self-sabotage, I mean the process of mentally blocking yourself from taking the necessary actions you require in order to achieve success. So why do we do it to ourselves? Well, I know that I've sabotaged myself at different times in my life, and in fact I can think of some real howlers throughout my own lifetime. However, we should have no regrets. Everything happens for a reason. And with that being said, it is obviously desirable to stop self-sabotage because the long-term effects of such behavior can seriously damage your prospects of obtaining success. So what causes self-sabotage? Well, a lot of times it comes down to fear, which, according to success psychology, is the fear of failure created by what we call the inner critic. Now, the inner critic is a very powerful inner opponent that manifests itself as a result of conditioning implanted in the subconscious from childhood. If as children we are subjected to conditioning that causes us to avoid taking what are perceived as risky actions, then this tends to persist into adulthood. The source of the external influence which creates this conditioning can be either a critical or nurturing parent. And it's something that comes from the Eric Berne school of thought based around transactional analysis. In a nutshell, Berne argued that people interact with each other in terms of child, adult, and parent. And in the literal sense, parents will often behave towards their children using critical, that is, constantly criticizing and controlling, or nurturing, which is being protective and sometimes overprotective behavior. Because the human character is formed during childhood, especially during the early years, the conditioning imposed is usually carried into adulthood and can lead to the creation of a very powerful inner critic in most people. And this is that inner entity that aims to hold you back and sabotages you against pursuing anything it deems as risky, mainly because it sees this as being in your best interests. Now, I talked about this in a previous webinar titled Potential, and self-sabotage comes, as I've said, from your subconscious mind. But think about this. Why would it be an enemy if it has your best interests at heart? Well, the inner critic is a powerful inner enemy, although its ultimate aim is to maintain your best interests and protect you from harm. It's doing what many enemies aim to do, and that is control you and make you bend to its will. And although the inner critic could be seen as a useful partner, it can also be a very bitter impediment to progress. And by controlling your subconscious thinking process, it causes self-sabotage by generating thoughts deep down that are contrary to any significant aims that you might have. Essentially, it says you are not capable of achieving a goal because to do so would be too risky and outside of your capabilities. Limiting beliefs, in other words. And these just weigh you down. Your subconscious subsequently processes and accepts these limiting beliefs, thus preventing you from taking the action you need to succeed. Now, a good book to reference here is by an ancient Chinese strategist called Sun Tzu, and it's called The Art of War. Now, before I say that, I should just mention that these self-limiting beliefs end up putting us into a box. And it's a box of our own making. But while we think we can't get out, it is actually made of cardboard. We can break out of it any time we want. Now, let's talk about The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It was written 2,500 years ago, and it's possibly the greatest book ever written on the application of strategy in war. And interestingly, despite its age, much of what is taught in The Art of War is still used by military students of Sun Tzu today. As a matter of fact, General Stormer Norman Schwarzkopf was one such example. The US general who led Operation Desert Storm against Iraq's occupation of Kuwait in 1991 was a student of Sun Tzu. It's also extensively used by business people, especially and somewhat unsurprisingly those based in China, who see the lessons as translating very effectively over to the complex and competitive world of commerce. The truth is that as an essentially psychological work, it can be applied to almost any situation where conflict is involved. Now, there are essentially two good pieces of advice that Sun Tzu gives to the general, which could also be adapted for this inner conflict that we're talking about with self-sabotage. The first one is know your enemy, know yourself. And it's actually a quite well-known statement from Sun Tzu. Know your enemy, know yourself implies that you should gather as much information about your enemy as possible. But in order to act against him effectively, you also need to know yourself implicitly. In other words, your strengths, weaknesses, your opportunities that are available to you, as well as the threats that could present themselves. Now, in management terms, this is called a SWOT analysis. And this analysis can be equally applied to your enemy, in this case, the inner critic. Because the acquisition of this knowledge through the SWOT analysis is essential in order to overcome an enemy. And in this case, if you know yourself, you'll also know your enemy, because your enemy is you. It's your subconscious. So how much can we gain by paying close attention to the fact that this opponent is you? Well, a significant amount, because this means that we are taking responsibility for our actions as they come from within ourselves. They have little to do with external influences, apart from the conditioning that I spoke about earlier that created the inner opponent when we were still a child. By recognizing this and taking responsibility, we are in a much stronger position to take control of the situation and devise strategies for dealing with the influence of the inner opponent. Because this inner opponent will make us do foolish things and take actions that we normally wouldn't take. Now, the other point from Sun Tzu is the double agent. See, this piece of advice can be gleaned from Sun Tzu is on the employment of spies. In The Art of War, he speaks of 5 types of spies. The one that's most relevant here is the double agent. And I'm not talking about secret agents living inside your head. However, metaphorically speaking, the inner critic is constantly gathering information on you in order to release its pronouncements into your subconscious in the same way that an enemy employs agents. So the analogy holds. These pronouncements form the basis for the subconscious acting against you to impede progress towards your goals and ultimately the achievement of your dreams. It's like walking around with a sign on your back saying, "Kick me." And it's a sign you actually put there yourself, but then you forget that you've actually done it. And the process becomes cyclical, because the more vulnerable to the inner enemy's attack you become through your subconscious sabotage, the greater the chances that you will give up, because that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You take self-defeating actions which create self-defeating thoughts, and the whole cycle goes on and on and on. So the agent, which it uses to gather information about your vulnerabilities, is your self-belief. Now remember, we did a webinar on self-belief recently, and I suggest that you go back and check that out. Because as well as being a self-saboteur, your inner critic also acts as information conduit for the agent acts as an information conduit for the inner critic. So if you're not in control of your self-belief, it will merely send information confirming your weaknesses back to your inner enemy, who will then use this to work against you. So there we go, the cyclical process, the downward spiral, the self-defeating thinking to beat your self-belief so that your self-belief becomes less and less and less. Now, in the military context, Sun Tzu states that we should identify the enemy's agents in order to turn them against him. In effect, create double agents. Now, this could also be done with your self-limiting beliefs. All you have to do is identify and turn them by the use of reprogramming. In other words, turn the limiting beliefs to positive ones, which then feed back positive information to the inner enemy. And the more you do this, the less likelihood that it will seek to engage you, and it will eventually withdraw. And as I just mentioned in a previous webinar, I spoke about ways that you can build a positive self-belief, and you need to go back and check out that webinar and follow the exercises that I suggested for you to be able to use to come through and build more self-belief. So basically, you just need to follow the simple advice, turn a double agent by changing your self-belief. So basically, you use your personal SWOT analysis. Imagine beginning to turn the agent to your way of thinking by telling it all the things you were good at. Again, going back to previous webinars, positive affirmations. You talk about what you have achieved in the past and how capable you are of achieving again in the future. Positive affirmations. Tell it how much you believe yourself deserving of success and accomplishment. Positive affirmations. That all the hard work you put into your goals warrant the fulfillment of your dreams. Inform it that you will succeed no matter what. That success is a certainty. And as you tell the agent this, it will start to change its attitude and start agreeing with you. So your subconscious will start to change. You can turn this inner critic from having a negative outlook to a more positive one. And soon it's converted over to your way of thinking and will work for your benefit instead. So if you use this along with the exercises from the self-belief webinar and continue to do it and continue to use positive affirmations and be consistent and don't back down, you can take control. Say to yourself, today I will not stand in my own way. Today I will not stand in my own way. You will overcome your self-sabotaging thoughts and subconscious mind and be able to achieve your goals and realize your dreams. In the words of Ralph Marston, there are plenty of difficult obstacles in your path. Don't allow yourself to become one of them. So on that point, go out there, have strong self-belief, change the subconscious control to positive, stop the self-sabotage, sponsor, promote, and advance, and create the success in your business that you know you're capable of. Thank you so much for listening to the webinar today.